Is this Cody Bradford breakout for real? What does this rotation look like in September? And how many Wyatt Langfords fit in a Ford F-150? On today's show, I'm answering all of your mailbag questions. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to the World Series champion Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Paddock, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan, covering this team for 11 seasons, including all 6 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Paddock, follow the show at Locked On Rangers, hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. On today's show, I'm answering all of your many wide-ranging mailbag questions. But first, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Now, today's question and answer mailbag is being recorded before the Thursday afternoon game against the A's, so all of these stats and figures and facts will be as of, 10 o'clock a.m. on Thursday morning, because I am going out of town. So I thought I would answer all of your burning questions about this team 2 weeks into the season. Now, let's get started with this mailbag. First question from my buddy Matt McCutcheon. He asked, when does Wyatt get his first big league ding-dong? Well, as of right now, Wyatt Langford has not had his first big league ding-dong. I'm assuming he's referring to home run, because that is the most appropriate way to answer this question. But let's say, hopefully, as you are listening to this, it's going up on Friday. Hopefully, as you're listening to this, he has already hit several big league ding-dongs, one off of J.P. Sears, the left-handed starting pitcher for the Oakland A's. But say this hasn't happened, I feel like it's got to happen this weekend. And if it doesn't, I'm not going to be too worried, because, again, it's just a couple weeks into Wyatt Langford's big league season. But I think hitting one off of J.P. France in Friday night's game against the Astros is definitely possible, because he's already seen him. Maybe it's off of Ronel Blanco. Maybe it's off of Christian Javier. Seeing a guy a second time within about a week's span is going to be helpful for him, especially a guy who makes so many adjustments, and having already had some at-bats against J.P. France, I think that will definitely help him. Having some at-bats already against Ronel Blanco, I think will help him. So hopefully, as you're listening to this, he has already hit his first big league ding-dong, but I think if it's not, then I think Friday night against J.P. France is my best bet for a guy who doesn't have the most overpowering stuff and can be victim of the long ball. Now, the next question comes for us from Melissa Cross. She asks, do you think Cody Bradford's early success is sustainable? Now, it depends on what you mean by sustainable. Do I think that Cody Bradford is going to continue to have a 1.40 ERA throughout the rest of the season, averaging over 6 innings per start, and a walk percentage in the top 10% of baseball, a strikeout rate a little bit above the average, and have the 99th percentile most valuable fastball in baseball at the end of the year? I don't think so. I don't think Cody Bradford is going to put up a Greg Maddux-like season and have a sub-2 ERA without overpowering stuff. But if we're talking about sustainable, is this guy a starting pitcher? Is this guy a capable number 4 or maybe even number 3 in your rotation? I think that's entirely possible. So far, the difference for Cody Bradford this year has been the breaking stuff. It has been much more effective, much more reliable. He can use the curveball for throwing to get strikes. Not as much a swing and miss pitch at this point, but if he is keeping hitters honest and landing it for strikes early in counts, getting ahead in counts, which is something he has done very, very well so far this season, and avoiding the walks, then yeah, I think he can be a starting pitcher. Right now, he's got a 100 batting average against his fastball, a 175 slugging percentage against that fastball, and it's averaging 90.4 miles an hour. It has been incredibly effective. He has got incredible extension. He has pinpoint command, and when he's getting a bigger than average zone, which he will get quite a bit with Jonah Heim behind the plate, which I think side note, I think Jonah Heim was a big part of Martin Perez's breakout season in 2022 of getting a little bit more of a generous strike zone than average. And when he's got that kind of a zone, he induces a lot of chases out of the zone. Right now, he is in the top 14% of baseball in terms of chase rate, getting guys to expand the zone, and that leads to a lot of weaker contact and him not getting hit as hard. There's still not a lot of margin for error when you're throwing 90 miles an hour, even if you are a lefty, even if you do have a good changeup and a pretty good curveball and a decent slider. It's still the margin for error. When you miss your spots, you're going to get taken yard quite a bit. And so far, that hasn't happened so much for Cody Bradford because he's been at the top of his game. Now, I think that I'm really hopeful for Cody Bradford. I think he's a great kid, a smart kid, hard worker, all the good adjectives you would want to ascribe to a kid. And it's been such a long time since the Rangers have had even an okay homegrown starting pitcher. And I'll be honest, Cody Bradford was not at the top of my list to break that streak. There were guys ahead of him, like, Jake Thompson or Chichi Gonzalez or, there's been quite a few. And maybe there's still hope that Jack Leiter will surpass him and be the Rangers' first homegrown number 3 in quite some time. But Cody Bradford deserves respect. He deserves laud. He deserves praise. And I think this is a guy who can stick in the rotation for sure. Right now, he's been arguably the Rangers' best starter. And Nathan Eovaldi has been absolutely fantastic this season. Cody Bradford, at this point, might be better. His expected ERA right now is 2.42. I think if he can keep it around there, if he can keep it below 3, heck, if he can keep his ERA below 3 or even right around 3, that is fantastic stuff. Especially if he can keep pitching you deep into games, that is highly valuable, especially at this early point in the season when the Rangers are waiting to get the rest of their rotation healthy and back in this rotation. And in the midst of a 17 games in 17-day stretch, every inning your starter can provide you is valuable. Saves the bullpen, saves the rest of your starters from having to, pitch as deep into games because your rest of your bullpen can come in when you need to. If your bullpen is getting mostly days off, or at least the A side of your bullpen is getting days off because Cody Bradford's pitching you deep into games. So, yeah, I don't think he's going to have a sub-2 ERA at the end of this season. Is he going to have a sub-3 ERA? Probably not. But is he going to be a guy you can throw out there every 5th day and he can get you a quality start? I think so. I'm really hopeful for Cody Bradford. I am so impressed with what he's done this season. And by adding that curveball and making the slider a little bit more of an effective pitch, it helps that fastball that was already great with pinpoint command, already a very good changeup. And it just sets up his arsenal to get you through the lineup more than 2 times, which last year was not something that he could do, which is why he was more effective in the bullpen than he was in the rotation. With these changes, I am really, really encouraged by Cody Bradford. I don't think it is a flash in the pan by any means, and we've seen guys who are lefties who don't throw the hardest have very, very long careers. It was just last year that Rich Hill was in the league at, age 43, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was signed on a team at some point this year with the amount of pitching injuries that are happening. So, long story short, I think Cody Bradford is going to stick in this rotation. He might eventually get pushed out because the Rangers have 3 really darn good pitchers, actually 4 pretty darn good pitchers that are on the injured list and coming into the rotation at some point, hopefully this season. But it's going to be a while before Cody Bradford gets pushed out, which was not the expectation heading into spring training. Now, next question comes to us from Landon Duhan. At what point should I not let the trauma of last year's bullpen affect me? They're doing really good, but I'm struggling to have full trust after last season. Now, Landon, I am right there with you on that. We have seen some rough patches from this Rangers pen already this season. Some blown saves by Jose Leclerc, a blown save by David Robertson, some bad outings from Yeri Rodriguez. We haven't seen anything bad from Kirby Yates so far as of this recording. But I understand the trauma of last year. But after going through what we all went through in the playoffs and seeing these guys come through in a big way, mainly in Jose Leclerc and Josh Sborz, and really wishing Josh Sborz a speedy recovery. Hopefully he gets back soon, but he looked fantastic early this season. But again, I feel a lot more comfortable with this bullpen now. I feel a lot more comfortable with David Robertson coming in, a guy who has pitched in, I believe, 800 games as of right now. He's just turned 39 this week actually, and he has been a consistent closer and back-end reliever since 2008, which is a long freaking time. Kirby Yates has been doing this for a long freaking time, and granted, I don't think that he's going to have the sub-2 ERA 40 save season that he had in 2019 in San Diego, but he's a guy you feel pretty comfortable with that splitter and fastball and slider combination. It's pretty darn good, and Leclerc is always going to be a little bit of a wild show. The walks are going to be there, but you've seen the high end of Leclerc. You've seen what it looks like when it's all working, and he did that in the biggest spots, in the biggest moments, and I have no question that he's going to come through again when it matters most. But also, these are just regular season games, so it should be a little less stressful. I feel a lot less stress in the low leverage situations that I did even last year. And last year was so bad that you go in with a 4 or 5 run lead into the 8th inning and the starter's out, you think, is this bullpen really going to hold on to this 5-6 run lead? That hasn't been the case as much this year, thanks largely in part to the B side of this bullpen being significantly better in Jacob Latz and Jose Urena, who has looked fantastic so far. Even Brock Burke and Grant Anderson have their moments of looking pretty decent so far this season. But I think that just letting it go and knowing that there's a lot more options this year, that if these guys do struggle, last year there wasn't a whole lot the Rangers could do to supplement it and to change things up. But this year they've got guys in the minor leagues, in Mark Church, in Antoine Kelly. We'll talk more about them later on in this show. There are a lot more options. If these guys continue to stink it up, then there are reinforcements coming. Coming up, we're going to look at what this rotation might look like come October, and that question about Wyatt Langford and the Ford F-150s, right after this word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Ibata. Spring is here. It's out with the old and in with the new. But don't splurge on anything new without getting cash back in return when you use Ibotta. Ibotta is a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies to toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, you add your offers in the app, upload your receipt, and get real cash that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Join the over 50 million users and earn cash back every time you shop over 2,700 brands and retailers, including all your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying the Ibotta app using code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store, download the free Ibotta app, and start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKEDONMLB. Now, our next question comes to us from Jake Rainey. He asked, in your opinion, who is trade bait to improve this team at the deadline? Do you see a scenario where Taveras is traded and Carter takes center field full time? Now, I think that's entirely possible, and that feels like, a situation that's coming, maybe not this year, but maybe this offseason, because the Rangers are going to be losing Max Scherzer to free agency. Maybe they re-sign him, maybe not. They're going to lose Andrew Heaney to free agency. They'll have another year of John Gray, but there will still be some spots in this rotation, and I think a trade of Leote to either Miami or maybe Milwaukee for one of their good young starting pitchers that's got years of control, I think that's definitely an option. But right now, I wouldn't be in any rush to trade Leote Taveras by any means. He's a 2.5 to 3 WAR player, and those don't grow on trees. They really don't. And there's been a lot of debate of, you got to just shove Wyatt Langford out there in the outfield every day. You got to get some other bat, because the Rangers have plenty of other bats for their DH. Maybe that ends up moving. They end up moving Leote Taveras and putting Evan Carter out there every day in center field and Wyatt Langford out there in left. And that's the way the Rangers hold on to Jared Walsh, who has been honestly pretty fantastic so far this season. Maybe he's the Rangers' everyday DH, and Nathaniel Lowe is the first baseman, and then Josh Young is at third base, and that's kind of how things go. Or maybe Walsh ends up playing in left field and Carter in center. I'm not exactly sure at this point, but I think Justin Foscue is a guy who I've looked at as not, I don't want to say expendable, because that's just a really harsh thing to say about a player, but at this point, it's really going to be hard for him to crack into this Rangers lineup every day. We saw him in his second major league plate appearance have that RBI single off of Josh Hader to get the Rangers within a couple of runs in the ninth inning, pinch hitting in a huge spot against one of the better closers in the game. That was an impressive plate appearance from Justin Foskey, who I think can hit probably pretty decently well at the major league level if there was an opportunity and if he wasn't on the IL right now. So I think that's more of an obvious choice there. Leote, I don't think the Rangers are in any hurry to move on from at this point, nor should they be. But once hopefully every hitter gets healthy, we'll see what happens with Jared Walsh. I think that might be the domino that pushes things forward with Leote, and we'll see what he's doing at that point. So far, he's looked solid, and dealing away guys who are young, cheap, controllable. He's got 3 seasons of control, including this one. And I would not be in any hurry because those guys are very difficult to come by. And there's not a whole lot of them waiting in the wings in AAA like some might think. Now, next question comes to us from Ralph Todd. What would be an ideal win-loss record target be by the end of May? Well, it's a little bit dependent on what's going on with everyone else. And this is about what I'm hoping is around 500. But the main thing is just it's relative to everybody else. It's relative to, are the Rangers in a playoff spot? An ideal win-loss record would be, undefeated until then, but that's not realistic. But if you're hovering around 500, or if you're within, I'd say 3 games of a playoff spot at that point, which right now the Rangers are on top of the AL West, and I don't think they would be in one of the wild card spots because the rest of the league is doing pretty darn well. But the AL West is an absolute mess right now. If the Rangers can just stay around 500 stay atop the AL West before they get the reinforcements back of the Scherzers, of the Mahles, of the deGroms, heck, of the Josh Youngs as well. If they can stay in a playoff spot or within reaching distance of 500, within scratching distance, calling it whatever kind of distance that's not all that out of reach, I think that's the ideal. It's more about how everyone else is doing than how the Rangers are doing, and are they poised to make that run? Are they poised to get a little bit better? Because you look at the rest of this April schedule. I mean, this road trip that they're starting today, as you're listening to this, 3 games in Houston, 4 games in Detroit, 3 games in Atlanta. After a 7-game home stretch, it's going to be tough. And then you got 3 games against the Mariners, 3 games against the Reds. After that road trip, you have a day off, and then you got a few games against the Nationals, the Royals, the A's, the Rockies. I mean, thankfully, it's looking like they're going to have a pretty, not that difficult road trip. The Royals are going to be pretty scrappy this year, and their pitching is really darn good, and they might hit enough to win some games as well. But a road trip where you get to go to Oakland and 2 Coors, that's a pretty darn good place to be. And then you've got a week against the Guardians and the Angels, and you look down later on, you got a road trip against the Phillies and against the Twins at that point late on in the month of May, where I think that Max Scherzer will hopefully be back by then. I'm almost 1,000% positive that Michael Lorenzen will be back by then. And then you end that month with a couple of games against the Diamondbacks, and you head into the month of June with a series against the Marlins, who have been absolutely atrocious at this point. Heck, if you head into June 1st, you're atop the division, you're within 3 games of a wild card, and if you're above 500 or even at 500 at that point, that is a great place to be, because the month of June is going to be a little tough, but hopefully you'll have Scherzer back. June 1st is when Josh Young is eligible to be off the IL. So again, it's not as much of a specific record as a placement and a reach of a range of how far from a playoff spot you are. Because if they're sitting in a playoff spot, if they're sitting atop the AL West come June 1st, I am feeling really darn bullish about this team's chances to win the AL West. That is a great freaking spot to be in. And that is what I'm hoping for from this Rangers squad. Now, the next question comes to us from Will Griswold. What would your ideal rotation be at the end of the year heading into the playoffs? Well, ideally everyone is healthy, everyone looks amazing, and my most bullish, hopeful, whimsy eyed prediction is that Jack Leiter looks absolutely amazing, makes it up to the big leagues, and bumps somebody else out of the rotation. But my main hope is that the big four are healthy when the Rangers get to the playoffs. You'll have a four-man rotation that looks like this come playoff time. Jacob deGrom, your Game 1 starter. Max Scherzer, Game 2 starter. Nate Eovaldi, your Game 3 starter. And Tyler Mahle, your Game 4 starter. With Cody Bradford, John Gray, Andrew Heaney, and Dane Dunning all in the pen, or maybe one of those guys is optioned down to the minor leagues or traded off somewhere else at that point. I don't think they're going to trade or cut anybody that is in this starting rotation, but we'll see. Hoping for a fully healthy Mahle, Scherzer, and deGrom and Nate Eovaldi come playoff time. It's aggressive, but if these are the four starting your games, if Tyler Mahle is your Game 4 starter, heck, that might be the best Game 4 starter of any playoff rotation come that time of year. And you know Jacob deGrom is going to be the best Game 1 starter. Max Scherzer, depending on his level of looking like his full self, I'm still a believer that he could get back to a elite version of himself. Not the Cy Young caliber version, but still a really darn good pitcher. And we all know how great Nate Eovaldi is in the playoffs. So I'm hoping for that. And your backups of, if one of those big four isn't healthy, of your Game 4 starters potentially being John Gray, Andrew Heaney, Dane Dunning, or Cody Bradford, that is a really darn good place to be. Coming up, we'll talk about some options from the farm system to help improve this bullpen. And how many Wyatt Langfords could afford Ford? How many whatever. You know what I'm talking about. Or you will. Right after this word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. If you wanted to bet on some Wyatt Langford home runs, if you wanted to bet on a Corey Seager MVP, or Wyatt Langford or Evan Carter AL Rookie of the Year, heck, I don't know if they have Cody Bradford Cy Young odds just yet, but if he keeps this up, he might just be on there. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Are you struggling to close deals? B2B selling is tougher than ever, and that's why I want to tell you about LinkedIn Sales Navigator. LinkedIn Sales Navigator is a sales intelligence platform that helps professionals effectively prospect and engage high-value customers, drive higher revenue, and increase sales performance. Sales Navigator helps you target the right buyers, surface key signals such as job changes or which accounts you should prioritize, and shows you hidden allies so you can find those buyers that are most likely to convert. Fueled by LinkedIn's 1 billion member platform, Sales Navigator gives you the most up-to-date first-party data, enabling you to unlock conversations with the people that matter. Right now, you can try LinkedIn Sales Navigator and get a 60-day free trial at linkedin.com/lockedon. That is linkedin.com/lockedon for a 60-day free trial. Let LinkedIn Sales Navigator help you sell like a superstar today. Just go to linkedin.com/lockedon and get started. Now, the next question comes to us from Ben Zajdel on Twitter. He asked, do the Rangers have anyone in the minors who could step up and become a reliable reliever this season? Well, the answer is yes. Yes, they have several that I feel very good about making their major league debut this year and helping with the big club and being reliable relievers to give the Rangers not only a good pen at the top end with those big four guys, but hopefully a deep pen as well. I think the list has to start with Mark Church, who I'm really surprised didn't make the major league roster out of camp. I'm a little surprised that Yuri Rodriguez was the guy who was chosen over him. I don't think he'll be in the minors much longer. The fastball has been good. He has been a multi-inning option. The slider is absolutely nasty, so I think Mark Church is the guy at the top of the list waiting to make his big league debut. I think Antoine Kelly, I was just utterly floored that he didn't make his big league debut last year. A lefty the Rangers got in the Matt Bush trade from Milwaukee, who has looked fantastic this past season, and is a guy who can throw in the upper 90s, has got good breaking stuff, a decent changeup as well, and has stopped walking the entire world at the end of last year, which was very, very helpful. And I was really just totally floored that the Rangers didn't put him in the big leagues last year with how atrocious the pen was, just to see if he was ready. Rangers must know something about him. Why they haven't put him in the big leagues is kind of beyond me. Why they didn't give him a big look in big league spring training is beyond me. they know more about their prospects than I do, but I think that they'd be very hard-pressed to go this full year without getting Antoine Kelly his first look at the big leagues. Another guy who is in Double-A, who is the closer at this point for the Frisco Rough Riders, Anthony Hoopy Tuio Natoa, or Bubba, a guy who was springing on some Rule 5 draft boards last year. The Rangers didn't protect him and put him on their 40-man roster, but he's got some nasty, nasty stuff, and I think that by the end of this year, he could be in the Rangers bullpen helping out there. Also, Emiliano Teodo is an option. He is starting at this point. We'll see if he sticks there. He throws 100, got a nasty breaking ball, an okay changeup, but the fastball and that breaking ball are both very, very effective pitches. I think the Rangers could fast-track him to the pen if they wanted to, but they're going to stick with him as a starter as long as they can. Chase Lee and Grant Wolfram are also guys who I think the Rangers will take a look at. Lee is a side-arming righty who doesn't throw all that hard, but has got a funky angle. We've seen that with Grant Anderson be effective at times, and Wolfram is a big, tall lefty who's got a nice splitter, got a nice fastball. He's 27 years old in Double-A, so we'll see if he gets up to Triple-A and up to the big leagues, but he's a guy to keep an eye on. Next question comes to us from Genry on Twitter. If you were Bochy, how often would you rest Seager and Heim? Well, so far, each have gotten 2 days off in the first couple weeks of the season total, so I think once a week, at least for Seager for right now, is probably going to be the option. Same with Heim, at least for now. It was a long, long season for both of them. Corey Seager, I still don't think is 110% healthy, but he is healthy enough to be playing, healthy enough to be in there most days. And when your backup is Josh Smith and Zeke Duran, those are some pretty darn good backups to play in. Obviously, Bruce Bochy has a lot more data on the wear and tear of these guys. He knows more about how they are handling things more. Whatever advanced technology the Rangers medical staff has about how often guys should play, how often guys should rest, things like that, how much stress is going into them, and how likely it is for them to get hurt while playing this often. So I definitely defer towards Bruce Bochy in that, but I think an expectation of once a week off for each of those guys, at least for now. For Heim, I think maybe throughout the season, 1 day off a week is going to be the move. But for Seager, for now, I think that might be the move as well. Next question comes to us from my brother, Bradley Patrick, in case you didn't know the last name, by the lower third, back there, down there on YouTube. Question from Bradley is it foolish to hold out hope for Jacob deGrom? Well, the answer is maybe, but probably not. I mean, I'm going to hold out hope for Jacob deGrom for the rest of my natural-born life. Watching him throw baseballs in a Texas Rangers uniform is some of the most joy I have gotten out of baseball, outside of, obviously, winning a World Series. This is one of the best pitchers we've ever seen. It's point blank. He's sensational, phenomenal. And those 6 starts were just absolute joy for me to watch last year. And hopefully he gets a playoff start with the Texas Rangers. Hopefully he can get a Game 1 start of a World Series with the Rangers. Hopefully he can have several healthy seasons. Hopefully he can be healthy come August, but I am always going to hold out hope for Jacob deGrom. He was always going to be a wild card, always going to be a risk, but I think if you don't hold out hope for Jacob deGrom to be healthy and to be amazing when healthy, then you just aren't a very hopeful person, and that's not who I want to be. Now, the last question is the question I've been teasing this entire episode because it's maybe my favorite question I've ever gotten in a mailbag episode. It is just the right amount of silliness and goofiness. This comes to us from Nicholas Lewis on Twitter. He asks, how much Ford could a Langford Ford if a Langford could Ford? Now, this is a great question. There's a lot of different ways you can go with it, but I made sure to do my research on all these questions, this question in particular. Now, let's start with Wyatt Langford. We know about Wyatt Langford. We know the dimensions, the stats, the expectations, everything about Wyatt Langford. Well, a lot of things about Wyatt Langford. And Ford. How do we want to define a Ford? Well, we could either go with a Fjord or a Ford in the road or whatever. But I figured, since we're in Texas, Ford, the truck or car company, the most Ford, I think, is a Ford F-150. So we are going to compare Wyatt Langford to a Ford F-150. I did my research on this, the latest model. We're going to go horsepower, because that's usually how people measure cars. 325 to 720 horsepower, ranging from 36,770, so starting from $36,770. The bed length is 66 to 96 inches, height of 77.2 inches, and a weight of 4,391 pounds. Now, we have Wyatt Langford, who has a salary of $740,000 this year. I'm assuming he is making the league minimum. That's what the league minimum is right now. He also has an $8 million signing bonus he got from the draft. So we're going to say $8.74 million for Wyatt Langford. He is 72 inches tall, 225 pounds. And as for the horsepower of Wyatt Langford, this is where the research went in here. I searched up how much force does an MLB hitter generate, and I found a study from Penn State that says the average force is roughly 2 tons that acts in the 0.7 milliseconds of contact time with a peak force of 4 tons. So average of 2 tons, peak of 4 tons. I'd say that he's about 75th percentile of how much force he's putting on the baseball. So let's say 3 tons of force. So how do we do that? We just converted it into horsepower. So we have Wyatt Langford is 3 tons of horsepower. So Wyatt Langford, how much forward could a Langford Ford if Langford Ford could Ford? Also, if we're talking about just capacity, a Ford F-150 can hold 5 Wyatt Langfords because it has 5 passengers. We'll see. Let's say he could add 3 or 4 or 5 more Wyatt Langfords in the back of the bed. So let's say a max of 10 Wyatt Langfords fit in the Ford F-150. If we are going in terms of horsepower, Wyatt Langford is 14.39 Fords of horsepower. Monetarily, this year, plus the signing bonus from last year, Langford is 237.69 Fords monetarily. In height, Wyatt Langford is 0.93 Fords. And in weight, Wyatt Langford is 0.05 Fords, because a Ford F-150 weighs, at minimum, 4,391 pounds. So, made sure to do my research on this incredibly silly question, and with thank you to Nick for the goofiest question I've ever answered and the most unnecessary research, because that is what this show is all about. Goofiness, enjoying baseball, and how much Fords could Langford Ford if a Langford could Ford. You now have several empirical answers to a question I guarantee not a single one of you besides Nick had thought of before today. Thank y'all so much for listening, and until next time, don't forget to enjoy World Series champion Texas Rangers baseball.